Good afternoon from Europe to Africa, and especially from Germany to Ghana. We continue with part 2, Africa in World Affairs, from Kwame Nkrumah. In a declaration issued at the end of the Belgrade Conference, the United Nations was asked to convene either a special session of the General Assembly to discuss disarmament or to call a World Disarmament Conference. There we stopped in part 1. Part 2. When the non-aligned nations talk of disarmament, they are not merely concerned with the destructiveness and madness of the armaments race. They are thinking of the vast possibilities now denied the people of the less developed areas for increased standards of living, the development of agriculture and industry, the planning of cities, the abolition of illiteracy and want, and the curing of disease. It has been estimated that 1/10 of the expenditure involved in armaments would be enough to raise the whole of the less developed world to the level of a self-sustaining economy. The influence of the uncommitted nations must be exerted to the full to restore a proper sense of values to the world. As a contribution to this end, the Ghana government set aside £50,000 for an assembly held in Accra in June 1962 and attended by representatives of all organizations throughout the world whose aim is the ending of the threat of nuclear warfare and the establishment of universal peace. Wow. At the meeting of the preparatory committee for this Accra Assembly held in Zagreb, Yugoslavia in March 1962, it was agreed that the following subjects should be discussed: the reducing of international tensions, methods of effective inspection and control in disarmament, the transformation of existing military nuclear materials to peaceful purposes, and the preventing of the spread of nuclear weapons. Economic problems involved in or arising from disarmament, and the examination of such fundamental problems as hunger, disease, ignorance, poverty, and servitude, with a view to utilizing for social purposes resources now misused as a result of the armaments race. The 3 basic aims of Ghana's foreign policy or African independence, African unity, and the maintenance of world peace through a policy of positive neutrality and non-alignment. The first 2 aims are inextricably bound together. Inextricably. Reading lessons in English with Lara Celestina. Oh, Ghana, I miss you. Since until we are free from foreign domination, we cannot be completely united. Yet united action is essential if we are to achieve full independence. The third aim is closely associated with the other two. Living as we do under the constant threat of universal destruction, the more unaligned nations there are, the wider the non-committed area of the world, the better the chances of human survival. By moral force, if not by material strength, the non-aligned nations must exert their influence to save the world for ultimate disaster. Yeah. The unity of Africa and the strength it would gather from continental integration of its economic and industrial development, supported by a united policy of non-alignment, could have a most powerful effect for world peace. Yeah, so Africa, stand up and get up and speak up. I, Kwame, do not believe it is possible for a state in the world today to secure its safety by withdrawing from international affairs and refusing to take a stand on issues which affect peace and war. This would be to follow a policy of negative neutralism, which is tantamount to a fatal belief that war between the great powers would bring misery and destruction only to those who participated in it. Since war, if it comes, is likely to destroy most of us, whether we are participants or not. Patriots or not. Whatever or not we are the cause of it, negative neutralism is no shield at all. Yeah, see? And Africa this time is so neutral in not giving any statement with these problems in Russia and Ukraine and Europe. It is completely impotent and even dangerous. The participants, the patriots, in the Belgrade conference held this view. They agreed it was essential that the non-aligned countries should participate in solving outstanding international issues concerning peace and security in the world, as none of them can remain unaffected by or indifferent to these issues. Declaration issued at the end of the conference in October 1961. They considered that the further extension of the non-committed area of the world constituted the only possible alternative to the policy of the total division of the world into blocks and the intensification of Cold War policies. A free and united Africa would contribute greatly to the strength of the non-committed area, while the enormous obstacles that still stand in the way of African freedom and unity must not be underestimated. Account must be taken of the ever-growing strength of our cause. For the opposition, the colonialism, both moral and material, is greater in the world today than it has ever been, and it is becoming more powerful all time. It is significant that at the 15th session of the General Assembly of the United Nations, a declaration on the granting of independence to colonial countries and peoples was adopted. Not only was colonialism condemned, but colonial powers were asked to begin preparations at once for the liberation of all territories still under their rule. I have to drink a drop of water. Where is all these contracts and declarations from the past? Who is keeping them? Why they not remind us? It is significant that at the 15th session of the General Assembly of the United Nations, a declaration on the granting of independence to colonial countries and people was adopted. Not only was colonialism condemned, but colonial powers were asked to begin preparations at once for the liberation of all territories still under their rule. This declaration was strongly supported at the Belgrade Conference. Though it has yet to be implemented. United States spokesmen have often declared their condemnation of colonialism and latterly have affirmed their support of African independence. We must hope this means that determined efforts will be made to halt the imperialist interventions of the Western Bloc in Africa. The Soviet Union, by the very nature of its state and constitution, is a supporter of independence. We can count also on large numbers of well-wishers in Britain and in other colonial countries. The days of colonialism in Africa are numbered. Despite the military reinforcements Portugal has hurriedly packed into Angola and the imperialist and Cold War machinations in the Congo, despite the latest suppressions of the nationalist movements in the Rhodesias, the grueling enforcement of apartheid in South Africa, and the frenzied maneuverings of neocolonialism in Africa. Sooner or later, and I think it will be much sooner than the world thinks, all these frantic efforts to save imperialism in Africa will be swept into the debris of history. Along with them will go to the fascist dictatorships in Europe that are so finely balanced on the prolongation of colonialism, which in the case of Spain provided the military means for the size of power, with the concurrence of a democratic world more concerned at the time with supporting reactionary ruling cliques as a bastion against communism than with the issue of popular liberty. In the present, there is a positive revolutionary connection between Captain Galvao's exposure of Portuguese atrocities in Angola after his plucky break for freedom and the intensification of nationalist activities in the Portuguese colonies. These in turn are undoubtedly having their reaction upon the intellectual and working class revolt in progress against the dictatorship in Portugal. The weakening of Portuguese fascism simultaneously at the metropolitan center and in the colonial periphery can start off a chain of events which might successfully engage Portuguese forces split between the metropolis and the colonies, provided there is no interference from the neo-colonialist and Cold War elements. There is the danger that South Africa's military forces may be brought into play to prevent the extension of the colonial revolt to its own and its neighbors' borders. The freedom fighters of Africa must prepare themselves for this danger, which also threatens the independent states who can meet ineffectively by unifying their military command and foreign policy and uniting with the liberation movements through a concerted strategy. The dangerous potentials herein envisaged are a geographic illustration of the distinct bearing of imperialism on international affairs through its instruments, colonialism and neo-colonialism. Oh God. Some must understand Kwame words. It can be readily seen that imperialism is a fundamental cause of war, an iniquitous system which has generated intense rivals and conflicts between nations that erupted into open warfare on a major scale in the scramble to secure a place in the sun of colonial let's say of colonial high class supremacy, I don't know. It has today spawned the neo-colonialism, which is as busy as ever in creating clashes among the nations. In their eagerness to exploit the resources of the overseas territories, they engage in wicked policies and then bring a serious threat to the peace of the world. Their grabbing involves them in a constant scramble, like crabs in a pot, climbing over each other, bugs, in order to get the biggest helping. More often than not, this scramble ends in physical fighting, with the loss of countless innocent lives. Yeah, you see these Ukraine people now. They are innocent. They're just like you and me and all the small people, majority. When we in Africa denounce imperialism and the resent of offshot neo-colonialism, we do it not only because we believe that Africa belongs to the Africans and should be governed by them, but also in the interest of world peace, which is so essential to our development and freedom. By abolishing imperialism in all its forms, the world will be rid of many of the present areas of conflict. It is in the same interest of world peace that we also advocate unity. A united Africa would be able to make a greater contribution towards the peace and progress of mankind. For one thing, it would resolve the problems of those arbitrary frontiers erected by the colonial powers, and so eliminate irredentist dissensions. There would be no foreign military based on African soil. Yeah, my greetings to Mali, President, from Kwame Nkrumah. With a united foreign policy and a common defense plan, there would be no need for them. In the concourse of African Union, no African country would be left in a position of solitary weakness in which it could be bullied into allowing them. Any kind of military pacts or alliances with outside powers would be unnecessary. Our united strength would be sufficient to deter any would-be aggressor, since an attack on any African country would be regarded as an attack on the Union. The maintenance of military forces imposes a heavy financial burden on even the most wealthy African states. We all need every penny we can get for development, and is suicidal for each of us individually to assume such a heavy burden when the weight could be lightened by sharing it among ourselves. Yes, I do not imagine that France would have dared to attack Bizerta if we had been united, nor would they explode atomic bombs in the Sahara in spite of urgent and repeated African objections. World peace today needs Africa's total independence, needs Africa's unity as a positive contribution to an elimination of the elements engaged in creating the conditions for war. Some of these elements are connected with the supply of materials for and promotion of the manufacture of the most lethal weapons of destruction yet devised. To ensure the continuance of this supply, Africa is being drawn into the danger zone of war. In Angola, the Rhodesias, in South Africa, a menacing military machine is being built up, aimed at destroying African independence and maintaining the servitude of millions of Africans to white supremacy. Supremacy is like the word don't want to come on my tongue. Supremacy, I don't know. I'm learning English reading here. In conditions of slavery. World peace is not possible without the complete liquidation of colonialism and the total liberation of peoples everywhere. The indivisibility of peace is stacked upon the indivisibility of freedom. And this indivisibility extends to minorities within independent states who are segregated from the body politic. Wherever there is the possibility of conflict arising out of discriminations and the refusal of human rights, the peace of the world is threatened. Hence, since it follows that if the true interest of all peoples is pursued, there must come an end to all forms of exploitation and oppression of men by men, of nation by nation. There must come an end to war. There must result peaceful coexistence and the prosperity and happiness of all mankind all over the world. Oh my God. One world, one love. This Kwame Nkrumah. The balance of forces in the world today has reached such a stage that the only avenue open to mankind is peaceful coexistence. The alternative to this is chaos, destruction, and annihilation and murdering. However, in terms of the African Revolution, we cannot speak of a balance of forces or even of coexistence as long as the problem of colonialism remains unsolved. Until colonialism and imperialism in all their various forms and manifestations have been completely eradicated from Africa, it would be inconsistent for the African Revolution to coexist with imperialism for future. That was his vision. Yeah, I don't know. Africa must awake now. It's the time. It don't help us to be now killed in Europe and in Ukraine and Russia. We need world peace. Peace. We, the new generation. Okay. Now I'm coming to prepare for my next Kwame Nkrumah chapter. Yes. Bye-bye to the world, and let us pray all for peace.